Hi, this is my chapter 4 takeaway. So I have a little script I wrote when I was reading the chapters, so just in case I keep glancing down somewhere, it's just my computer. Okay, so I was excited to when I was reading the chapter, I was excited because I like to think of myself as a big music person. I mean, I have those Frank Ocean posters on my wall, and I tend to listen to music just 25/8. So I was like, I'm gonna record what I have to say. So, when I started off reading the textbook, it talks about Lil Nas X. And personally, he is one of my top artists, and he's just somebody whose content I enjoy interacting with. Before he blew up, he already had a big following on Twitter, which is now X, on his Twitter account Nas Mirage. And he would post memes, and he would make these interactive threads, and he was just super active, so his posts would always go viral. When he dropped Old Town Road, those same posts were the reason why Old Town Road kind of got to how big it got. I remember seeing he posted it was a tweet, right? And it was a couple sentences, and then the video, and it was of a cowboy on a bull, and then the audio was Old Town Road playing, and that went very viral. Also, TikTok was getting big at this period. It was 2019, so TikTok was also getting big, and then Old Town Road trended on there. He ended up making a lot of remixes with other artists. One of the big ones was with Billy Ray Cyrus. The song was on Billboard charts, and it was also the most streamed song with 2.5 million streams. He still makes music, by the way. He's dropping music right now, so I like it if you guys want to check it out. So when I was reading the textbook, I grouped a bunch of the things it said into big, broader sections, just so it was easier to just get summarize everything the textbook was saying, basically. So we're gonna start off with the history. 1877, Thomas Edison succeeded in both recording and playing back sound on what was called the phonograph. He envisioned that machine would be used for office work, like an answering machine, so that businesses could still use, their telephones and keep track of valuable records. It's at the foundation for, answering machines that we have now, audio surveillance equipment, voice memo apps, voice recognition software. In 1887, I think I'm saying this right, but I'm not sure. Emily Berliner, she developed a butter machine that was called the gramophone, and that played round, flat discs or records. And that machine was hand powered. So that allowed for the mass production of records, and then these records could be stamped with labels, which then could be sorted by their title, producer, songwriter. It was just easier to have animated easier, so there was a system in place. Between 1900 and 1950, record players became an essential appliance in American homes. In the 1920s, the hand crank devices were replaced by electric record players. In 1948, CBS Records introduced 33 RPM, which is revolutions per minute, long playing records with about 20 minutes on each side, which then created the market for albums. In the 1940s, in this era, there was advancement with magnetic audio tapes and tape players. So it was finally possible to edit the sound and do multi-track mixing, where instruments and vocals could be recorded at one location and then be edited at another location. By the mid-1960s, cassettes were developed, which allowed listeners to listen to music anywhere, everywhere. In the 1970s, Thomas Stockham, he made the first digital audio recordings. And then towards the end of the 1970s, Sony and Philips were working on a way to digitally record disc, which could then be produced at a lower cost. And then the result were CDs, and then they were on the market by 1983. In 1992, the MP3 file format was developed, and then by 1999, Napster made the MP3 format popular since music files were available for download. At the beginning of this, it was done illegally, and then they went through like battles so that they could come back and be a legal service. I mean, because it was so popular to illegally download music, around like 2011, major internet service providers like AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, they agreed to help the music industry identify customers that were illegally downloading music. But that help embrace services like iTunes. So like around 2008, iTunes was the major, it was a top music retailer. But then around 2013, digital download sales fell, and it was because now you could stream music. With the ability to stream music, it made it easier to access music. You just had to pay like a subscription fee, $5 to $10 on like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora, whatever. The types of music. So the textbook goes into detail about a good bit of genres, but I just kind of talk about popular music, jazz, rock and roll, and hip hop. Well, popular music is what it is. Popular music, pop music. It's the music that appeals to the large population. It's what's in demand. Jazz was developed in New Orleans, and it was a mix of musical styles like African rhythms, blues, which those emerged from Black spiritual ballads and work songs from the rural South, and also gospel. Jazz was influential in the 1930s and the 1940s. It was popularized by Louis Armstrong, Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, and it used instruments like the piano, the clarinet, guitar, drums, and the bass. Okay, rock and roll. So rock and roll hit in the 1950s, and it was a slang term for sex, which made it controversial. But rock and roll transformed the structure of sound recording and the radio, and it set the stage for what we have today in like the producing, the distributing, and how you perform. So rock and roll combined the North and the South in the 1950s. With the spread, it began to break down cultural boundaries that were set in the South, and then it was saturating the North, like the Northern sound, with Southern artists. And then by the mid 1950s, rock and roll was gaining acceptance. The textbook goes into great detail about rock and roll because it was just so influential in just so many aspects. So hip hop is a term for Black urban culture, which included rapping, breakdancing, street clothing, and then sampling by the DJs, which got popular in the late 1970s. By 1985, hip hop became a popular genre, and it spawned hundreds of new independent labels. Then you fast forward to about 2017, and hip hop became one of the top music genres in the United States, with notable artists like Kanye West, Drake, Nicki Minaj, Cardi B, Gunna, Future, Lil Baby, A$AP Rocky. Like, we can list a lot of rappers. Okay, so then masculinity and femininity was another broad topic. Rock and roll, again, influential, was the first genre to cause issues between like sexual identity and orientation, and like the early rock performers like Elvis Presley or Mick Jagger, since their appearance was androgynous, it just caused a lot of mayhem. And the most notable one was Little Richard. He blurred the lines between masculinity and femininity because of the fear of becoming a sex symbol for white girls. But he paved the way for a lot of performers today, like Elton John, Lady Gaga, Harry Styles, Prince. Cover music. So in the mid 1960s, covering music was routinely done by Black and white artists. Although it's more common now, back then, whenever a white artist covered a Black artist song, it almost always was an attempt to capitalize off of the popular songs that were in the R&B chart, which were the Black artists category back then. So I mean, I can't remember exactly who it was, but there was one specific black artist that covered a white artist's song, and their version was much more popular compared to the white artist's version. So that was interesting to note. The British are coming. Another thing we thank the British for is the change of rock and roll to just rock. In 1964, with the rise of British bands like the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, they influenced a bunch of the generations to come. Like the Rolling Stones influenced the industry by emphasizing gritty, chord-driven, high-volume rock sounds, which included like hard rock or punk. The Beatles influenced in the more accessible, softer sound in genres like power pop, indie. So then these British groups, you know, they helped change the industry also because labels began to hire writers that could write songs to match the performers, which, I mean, that's common today. You know, you hear about ghostwriters, you hear how Drake has ghostwriters, and then at the end of like Apple Music lyrics, you'll see all the writers. So, I mean, it's common to have more people, you know, write with you on a song. Okay, moving on, the business aspect of making and selling and profiting from music. So the making part, the labels are driven by the artists and the agents. And the agents discover, develop, and sometimes manage the artists. They're the ones that listen to the demos from the artists, and they decide, you know, who to sign and then what to record. Selling, about 79% of the US music business is composed of streaming services. Physical recordings like CDs and some vinyl is about 50% of sales. CD sales are on a decline, they're about 5.5. Vinyl album sales, they're on the rise right now, and they're about 4.5 in sales. So I mean, there is like a diverse way, but the main one is streaming. Profiting, once the music is sold, the money is then divided among the music label, the artists, the songwriters, and the song publishers. Since most music is streamed, there was a system of royalties put into place, okay? So you have your master recording royalties, which are the profits determined by the contract that the labels and the artists or band decide. Public performance royalties, they're paid to the songwriters and the publisher when the music is played on the radio, television, streaming in stores, bars, whatever. Mechanical royalties, those are automatically paid to the songwriters and publishers when music is sold or streamed, and it's always at a rate of 9.1 cents per song. Synchronization royalties, those are paid when music appears in a film, TV show, or commercial. And then the film directors or the TV producers, they pay a negotiated rate before they can use the music, which is then divided up between the artist, the label, and the songwriters. So the problem with streaming music, because yes, there is a problem, is figuring out what counts as a sale of a song or an album. So the music industry came to the standard that 1,500 song streams from an album equals one album sell. So you have to stream an album 1,500 times. 150 song streams equal the sale of a single. So, you know. Okay, and then as of today, how much streaming services pay artists per stream? Spotify is 0.0033 cents, like of a dollar. Like, that's really low. Apple Music, 0.01 cents. Does anybody use YouTube Music? 0.008. Tidal, 0.013. And what is considered a stream is you have to play at least 30 seconds, okay? Keep that in mind. A stream is at least listening to 30 seconds of a song. So now to make $1,000 off of a song, this is how many times it has to be streamed. Spotify, 303,030. Did I say that right? 303,030. I don't know. Apple Music, which is 100,000, and YouTube Music, which is 125,000. So it takes a lot. So get to listening to those songs that if you want your artist to get paid correctly. But in my opinion, I think we should just pay them a good amount at the beginning, because not everybody can write, can sing, perform, music. I think it's a talent. It's a talent. So my final thoughts. Music is always going to be here. It's in a way, I personally think it's a way to communicate. You can reflect personal opinions. It's to entertain. You can relate to it. Because think about it. If all the heartbroken girls didn't listen to music, who would Taylor Swift sell her music to? Think about it. But yeah, so I couldn't imagine my life without music. I don't know if you guys can or can't. You guys. And I'm gonna turn this in. Okay, but yeah, so that was my chapter 4 takeaway. I really did like this chapter. Yeah, thanks.